I had a request to talk about the difference between avoidant personality disorder and being a highly sensitive person. Um, so I'm going to try and talk about the differences. And I can tell you, I think that I'm not a highly sensitive person, and that's kind of unfortunate. I think that it's kind of a compliment to be highly sensitive. It is another way of describing it I heard is innate sensitivity. Um, Basically, the way their brain structure works, people who are highly sensitive are literally picking more information up from the world than other people. And it's something like 1 in 5 people are highly sensitive. I have a list here of sort of like official, it's not quite the diagnosis. I don't, because it's a physical thing, I don't think it's in the DSM. You know, it's like dwarfism isn't in the DSM. So I don't know if they have real official diagnostic tools. But there are certain traits and then there are certain behaviors that are associated with highly sensitive people. So I'm going to run through them. First of all is a serious depth of processing. So something doesn't, you don't feel something on the surface, you really feel it deeply, physically deeply inside you. And because of that, there's a tendency toward overstimulation because of that. So, oh geez, I'm trying to come up with examples in my own life, and again, I don't think I'm highly sensitive, but like for instance, if somebody is chewing really loudly, I mean, it might seriously cause actual physical disgust. A physical reaction to somebody, listening to somebody making noise while they're chewing or something like that, or you know, if music is too loud or music is too annoying or anything like that can push you over the edge. Emotional reactivity and empathy, again, because you literally feel things deeper. So when you see something, you can't just blase, okay, that's happening. You actually have to react. And the degree of sensitivity to stimuli, like I said about, you know, if somebody's got music and it's way too loud or something like that, it might just push you over the edge. The common traits of people who, and of course they don't have all of these, it's just like avoidant personality disorder, you're not going to have them all, but these are common things that people find. Low risk taking, because there is a high motivation to avoid overstimulation. So obviously you're not going to do things that might risk becoming overstimulated because you can't handle whatever the stimulation is. A need for quiet, especially, and a lot of times quiet while you're alone. Preferences for deeply meaningful conversations, because again, superficial things are just, they can't feel things superficially, it's got to be intense and deep. A greater awareness of subtleties in emotional and nonverbal communication, and a sense of being different and not the ideal. Okay, so you can see then why there could be overlap. Why specifically you could be highly sensitive, and this is just how you are. This is your brain makeup. This is how you perceive things. And if you put all those things in the search engine, it might come up with something that's avoidant. Obviously, it can be both. I think there's somebody who is. But it's not automatic if you have one that you have the other. And I personally think that it would be really very easy to be highly sensitive and think that that would be avoidant, because you're avoiding stimulating situations. But again, being avoidant does not mean that you avoid. Being avoidant means that you feel unworthy of having somebody care for you, in a nutshell. Unworthy of basically anything positive happening in your life. That's avoidant. It's not, and so you avoid relationships not because you're avoiding the stimulus of the relationships, although they can be extremely overstimulating. If you've got your brain going 16 million ways of trying to understand how possibly this odd thing of somebody actually wanting to be with you and be around you, how is that possible? That's what the avoidance comes from, is to avoid the pain of trying to figure that out. Whereas with highly sensitive people, basically they're just overreactive. I've heard, and I don't mean that as a negative thing, I just mean overly reactive, more than the average. I've heard that one of the hallmarks of a highly sensitive person is they can't stand watching horror movies. Again, because they're overemphasized and because they can't take the stimulation, etc. They really hate them because they're just overwhelming. Not really talking the differences. So let me try to break this down a little bit. Here, let me look at my list again. Low risk taking. You know what? Avoidant people actually are high risk takers. And I have a lot of people that would kind of yell at me about that, but it's true, because for an avoidant person to speak to anybody is an extremely risky behavior for them. Just talking to somebody, any interaction whatsoever, is risky. Now, it might be to somebody else that it's low risk taking, but for highly sensitive people, talking and having in-depth conversations with either strangers or people that they're having ongoing relationships with. Yes, avoidant people don't like to have sort of superficial small talk type thing, because there's no point in it, and it's extremely stressful to do that, and you get very little back from it. So they don't like to do it, but that's coming from a very different place from the highly sensitive people who just are. It's not that they're avoiding small talk because it doesn't give them anything back. It's they're avoiding small talk because they want something deeper and bigger all the time. And for an avoidant person, usually deeper and bigger is scarier and more horrifying, and they avoid it because that means that there is an interpersonal relationship that is scary and awful, and they just don't want to deal with that. Need for quiet and alone time, that could be highly sensitive person, or it could be introversion, or it could be avoidant personality disorder. The quiet specifically, that highly sensitive people need. So it's not alone time listening to music. It's not alone time playing a video game. It's alone time with dead quiet. Because they've been overstimulated being out in the world, listening to cars drive by and everything else, and they just want quiet. So, and not even lesser volume, but quiet. Just because they've already had too much to deal with. High motivation to avoid overstimulation. Well, see, the thing is that the stimulation that they're talking about with a highly sensitive person is literally a sensory stimulation type thing. It's too loud, it's too cold, etc. Whereas the stimulation for an avoidant person is the interaction with another person. That's the type of stimulation that avoidant people are trying to avoid, as opposed to physical sensory stimulation. Greater awareness of subtleties in emotional and nonverbal communication. Yeah, looking for micro expressions, etc. That's also very, very common with avoidant people. But the difference is avoidant people use it as a predictive mechanism to try to figure out what the person is thinking, as opposed to a highly sensitive person is just more aware. But they're not trying actively to use that information in order to figure out how somebody else is going to react or act in the future. They're just, more aware of the world around them, in a nutshell. And sense of being different and not the ideal, again, from their perspective, from highly sensitive person's perspective, they're just more aware that, yeah, there's differences between me and another person. And not the ideal, but it does not kill their self-esteem necessarily. As a matter of fact, a lot of highly sensitive people are aware of it, and they go with it, and they go for it, and they embrace it, and they love it, and they, exacerbate it as much as possible, and make those differences really, really aware, and they become proud of it. As opposed to an avoidant person, when they have this sort of thing pop up, immediately they use it to attack their self-esteem. So I'm not sure if I really described this as well as maybe you're hoping, and there's quite a bit of assumptions in there. I've read up on it, but I have not, like I said, I don't think I'm highly sensitive, so I can't tell you personally my experience on it, but I can say that based on what I'm reading, that's what I see as the difference. And I'm sure there are people that are highly sensitive that have explained their perspective, and maybe if you looked up that stuff and then compared it to what I said, maybe that would give you a more round, full sort of bit of information to make your education on it complete. Again, I don't know that there is any way of really diagnosing, other than I suppose they must have, because they've said that it's some sort of difference in the brain. There's physical difference in the brain with highly sensitive people compared to the rest of the population. So they must have some sort of test, but I don't think it's worth going through it. Other than if you're thinking maybe you're avoidant, before you label yourself and yoke yourself with this thing that can't ever change, and you can adapt to it and you can sort of get used to it, but it doesn't ever get better. And before you do that, if you have these types of symptoms, maybe look into highly sensitive information. Losing my way of thinking all of a sudden. Anyway, because if you read up on that, maybe it can help you, maybe it can give you more understanding about yourself, and maybe it can show you a way to handle the world in a way that makes it easier for you. Because again, with highly sensitive people, if they're aware of it and they adjust for it, then it can make their lives better, easier, and happier. And if that's all you have to do instead of dealing with being avoidant, hey, any day of the week, take it.